Welcome to What the Bible Says, a Lugnuts podcast group production. Hello and welcome to today's podcast. We still don't have a title for this. We don't know what to call it, other than depression. I'm Kenny Cramer. I'm joined along with Pastor Steve Cox. Today we're on, if you don't know, we're going through Looking Up from the Stubborn Darkness, Depression, in the book by Edward T. Welch. We're just kind of going through and sharing, what we took away from each chapter, and kind of giving you a look at, maybe what we went through in our battle of depression, and ways that, we can be a light for you, and how you can, battle through your own form of depression. So we're on chapter 3 of the book. Chapter 3 deals with definition and causes. And before we went on the air here, I told Steve that, this really wasn't my favorite chapter. It deals with a lot of definitions and goes into, some medical causes, medical definitions. And I'm not a medical definition cause kind of guy. I kind of want answers rather than, oh, you have this and this means XYZ. Mm-hmm. I want to know answers.
Sure. But yet terminology is good.
Yes.
And understanding what is going on, because I do think we do ask those questions. Well, what is actually going on here? Why is this happening? And so even though this may be a little more mechanical today and not a whole lot of emotion expressed, still you want a proper diagnosis. Mm-hmm. But without a proper diagnosis, it's really kind of hard to say, okay, well, what's the cure? Right. Unless I understand what's going on and why it's happening. So be patient. Be patient.
Yes.
And so we'll kind of grind through this chapter today.
Mm-hmm. I don't know about you, but I really, the big takeaway from me was this first paragraph. While it is some encouragement to know that you are not alone and that others have experienced what you have, it is more helpful to know the cause and cure. I mean, again, I'm not one to dive into, definitions and stuff like that, but to know that, one, you're not alone. Other people are going through this. But to know the cause and the cure is something that right off the bat you could say, okay, I can figure out what I have and how to deal with it.
Right. Because in any type of situation, you need hope. If you don't have any hope, then
right,
it's done.
Right.
And I think what this does give us hope that there is a cause, there is a cure, but not one size fits all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where we have a tendency to get in trouble, is labels and cause and effect, and just have to be very careful because we're all different. Mm-hmm. We're all hardwired in very different ways. So if you're listening to us, don't get locked into, well, this has to be this or this has to be this, because you're different. You're a human being. Just because you don't respond in the same way as another person doesn't mean that you've lost all hope.
Right.
There's no hope for you.
Right.
So it just means you maybe have to dig a little deeper.
Right. And all depression is different too. Not all depression is, being locked in a dark room and curled up in a ball and not eating for 3 weeks.
Right.
Your depression is going to be different from mine. It's going to be different than Steve's. So, I mean, don't think that you're alone in your depression, because everyone, whether they know it or not, has probably gone through depression at some point in their life. But everyone's depression is different. Mm-hmm. So just when you know that, it's like, okay, I'm not alone. There are 7 billion other people who have gone through this before.
Right. And the other thing that I got, I know, again, just kind of big picture here, because I don't think we're going to want to bore you with a lot of minutia here. A lot of terminology here today, is it says try to be patient.
Mm.
And when you're hurting, that's the last words you want to hear.
Yes.
Just be patient. Now, not patient to the point of not taking steps that you need to take,
Mm-hmm.
but also just, we've already expressed it right now. I want answers now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And sometimes answers don't come right
now.
away, right now. So the other thing that you're going to hear us talk about, and again, it's easy for both of us to say because we're on the other side of the depression that we both have experienced,
Mm-hmm.
is, you just got to say, okay, God, you're up to something here. Not quite sure what it is, but I will trust you.
Yes. Yes. This whole book basically deals with trusting God and knowing that it is not about you. And we'll dive into that in chapter 9 when we get there. But it's basically what this book boils down to is we need to trust God and know that it's not about us.
Mm-hmm.
Still on page 15 there, in that next paragraph right after that first one, don't commit yourself too quickly to one explanation because depression begs for an answer. So it might not boil down to just one explanation. There can be many different ones, but instead of sitting there wanting an explanation, like you said, we need to be patient because when it comes to God, He works in His own time. So answers can come, right away. They can come in a day, a month, a year, or in some cases, we're never gonna know.
I was gonna say maybe never, right?
Maybe that's the best case for us. Because I know I think it's Deuteronomy 31, it says there are some secrets.
29:29.
Close.
Yeah. Missed it by this much, as Bob Euchre
But
would say.
yeah, it was, there are some secrets that we're never going to know.
Yeah.
So, and that's probably for the best.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we knew everything, then why would we then rely on God if we knew everything?
Yep.
And then, for me, I kind of found it helpful that there was like a whole list of different things, symptoms and stuff like that. There's 9 different symptoms listed. Mood, diminished interest, kind of things like that. For me, I had number 1, depressed mood of the day nearly every day, as indicated by either a subjective report, things like that. And then number 4, which is insomnia or hypersomnia nearly every day. 7, which was feeling of worthlessness or excessive inappropriate guilt nearly every day. Those were the ones to me that kind of stood out, and said, you know what? Yeah, that's kind of me and what I went through in depression during my battle of it.
I think what becomes hard in this part of the book is a lot of this becomes very subjective.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we have to be very careful because we use the word depression quite often. And not trying to play semantics here, but is a person really discouraged or depressed? Yeah. Or is, life, where is that? And I'm not here to argue that because, again, but just be very careful because what happens is you have a tendency to give yourself a label.
Yeah.
And once you get a label, it's kind of hard. That now becomes how you identify yourself. And so, again, we're trying to figure out, okay, what are some symptoms here and what are some causes that, we're going to talk about a little bit. And I do believe there's a definite, place for that. But again, just a little warning shot here across the bow. Be very careful about, I must have it because, I've got 3 of these 9. That must mean I'm depressed or whatever the case might be.
Right. Because You're right. Like depression and kind of like a discouragement, they walk a fine line.
Mm-hmm.
I think, um, and page 16, there is a kind of a explanation for depression. It says it expresses itself in self condemnation and hopelessness. Talking about depression. So that's where depression kind of takes over. Is when you start the self condemnation and worthlessness and hopelessness thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's where depression kind of takes over. I think we all start off our battle of depression being discouraged, but then it quickly just falls off the waterfall, and we just go downhill really, really quickly and fall into that self condemnation and hopelessness kind of pool, and that's where depression just takes over. That's just my takeaway from
Sure.
it. That's where I think we all start off as being discouraged because we don't know an answer. We want the answer now. We don't get it, so we quickly dive into different answers we think, but then that can dive into a whole different pool that we didn't even think we wanted to go down, and then you're looking at 11 years later and you're looking back and it's like, you know what? Yeah, I think I started off pretty discouraged.
Yep.
Then some of the causes, there's kind of a list of some. There are 6: poor appetite or overeating, insomnia or hypersomnia, low energy or fatigue, low self-esteem, poor concentration, and feelings of hopelessness. Mine were 1, 2, and 4. I had pretty low self-esteem during my time of depression, insomnia or hypersomnia, as stating before, and then poor appetite or overeating was definitely a big one for me. And then, that paragraph right after that, add to this list some feelings of anxiousness, guilty, angry, unloved, and then you can just see how depression cuts with such a broad swath and includes so many. I'm trying not to go like page by page here. I'm trying to get the big picture.
Right.
It's kind of hard because I've never really been asked just to do a flyover of each page before. So trying to find the biggest takeaways from this book is kind of hard. I guess,
in one sense, you want a diagnosis, but you just have to be very careful because again, a lot of it is very subjective. And you have some poor appetite, insomnia, but again, just because you're not sleeping well and you don't have a good appetite, does that mean you're depressed?
No,
it doesn't at all. So that's where again, that's that fine line of and there's not really, because if you go to page 19, you get into the whole idea of chemical imbalances, and this is where again it's very difficult because there are some indicators that you take a look at as far as a cause and effect, but there is no you can't go to the doctor and have them draw your blood and say you're depressed. There's no, and I'm not trying to be silly or funny about it.
No,
I'm just trying to say it's not, if you go and you have COVID, there's a marker that says you have COVID.
Right.
You have whatever. And I'm not trying to make light of it, but I think we have to be very careful about the fact that there is just not a real definitive way to measure if I have depression or I'm in the throes of depression. There can be some physical indicators that go along with that, but that's where you have to be really careful. And I'll try not to be, again, the pencil head of neurological science here about getting into the neurotransmitters in the body and the reuptake inhibitors that go along with that. So I'll stop right there.
Yeah. And the problem with, it says on page 19 too, the problem with immediately opting for a medical explanation is that once the decision is made, every other perspective seems superficial or irrelevant.
Right.
So once you opt for getting a explanation from a doctor saying, hey, am I depressed or not? any other thing is just now become superficial
Mm-hmm.
and kind of meaningless too.
Well, and it could be that the medical problem or whatever issue really isn't the issue.
Right.
I think that's what you're saying. You
Right.
have a tendency to dismiss and say, well, okay, I figured out what it is. And again, that just takes us down the whole, and I don't know if later on, if there's a chapter and we talk about medication and that whole topic of, how that works in there. But yeah, I think that's, and again, it just goes back to, and I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting an answer, but if I can, somebody give me an answer and tell me this is going to solve the problem and I can take a pill. And let's face it, Kenny, I'm into pain relief too, like everybody else.
Right. I don't want to be dealing with pain.
No,
I want to.
I like pain relief. I'm a pain relief kind of guy. So
Give me that bottle of Tylenol because I know it's going to cure my headache. I don't want to just sit here and have a headache all day. Because suffering. Whenever there is suffering and depression, whenever there is suffering and depression is most surely suffering. We'll dive into what that means in that next chapter. But, on that topic of medication, in the response on page 21, it says, even if medication relieves some of the burden of depression, it may be functioning like aspirin. That is, it takes away some of the symptoms, but the root problems persist. So it could be we're battling with depression, but what is the underlying issue we're actually dealing with? Because depression can come in different ways, and there could be that underlying issue that we need to address. It could be a heart issue, it could be something else, it could be whatever it is. If we're just dealing with the first part, we get that away. Well, if we get rid of depression, but not deal with, whatever issue is actually like causing it, it's just going to come back. And then so at that point, it's like, why waste your time if it comes back getting rid of depression? Because if you get rid of it, it's just going to come back.
Well, I think the page before, and we can kind of sum up, says that it's not only is there an organic issue going on here, but your depression is most likely and profoundly spiritual in nature. And I think that's what you're talking about here. And it gets back to God in the midst of this. And do I trust God? Why is God allowing this to happen to me? And so there's usually some suffering that's going along with all this. And again, these are all topics that we'll unpack as we go on. But, I think this chapter, again, just kind of helps us to do a flyover, so to speak, of the human body. The psalmist says we were fearfully and wonderfully made. The human body is a very complicated piece of machinery, and so we have to be very careful how we approach this topic. Not to dismiss the organic aspects of it, but also to say, where's God in the midst of all this?
Yeah.
And there's a spiritual component to the whole thing as well.
Yeah. So looking forward to chapter 4, that's where we start diving into really the meat of the book, and we deal with the topic of suffering. And to me, topics, they don't get any easier from here. They got a lot tougher, but in the long run, it's for the best. And we have to deal with those hard topics in order to get the cure, if you will, for depression. So for Steve, this is Kenny Cramer saying, we hope you find hope in your depression. And like we said before, if you don't have hope at this moment, you can hang on to ours. We'll get you going, but you can't hold on to it for very long because, you got to find it your own at some point.
Well, our hope and trust ultimately comes in God. And I guess that's the key.
Yep. So we'll see you next week.
We hope you enjoyed the podcast today. If you did, please check out our website for more podcast episodes and shows at thelugnaspodcastgroup.com. Like us on Facebook and Instagram, and we'll see you next week.